Esta conferencia comenzará a grabarse.
Okay, so finally, I would like to say that this webinar will be recorded and will be available on the InSPIRES website and in our YouTube channel. So I give the floor to Ignasi. Thank you for being.
Thank you. Hello to everyone. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you this hour. And I will try to explain a little bit about the open access and the different ways of disseminating and publishing open access. I will stop sharing my webcam because it probably will be easier. Let's start with the presentation. We will talk about open access. Sometimes this is a term that is well known, but sometimes there are some misunderstandings, some different definitions about open access. So we'll see here open access in all the general views that it's possible to share any publication. We'll talk mainly about publications because this is the aim of the talk, but also, at the end of the talk, I will mention a little bit about research data. Open access has a long history, as I will show in a minute, but also now open access is part of a broader movement of broader activities called open science. This is the slide shown many years ago by Jean-Claude Burgelman when he was sharing these ideas of what they called at that time Science 2.0. The idea of the European Commission was to look at all the cycle of the research, so the analysis, publication, review, conceptualization, and data gathering, and to see that in any stage you can share openly your activities, your results. So the idea of open science is not just restricted to the results, it's also opening any kind of activity. Here, probably we are familiar with open access or with open data, also with all the projects on citizen science, code, etc. So that's open access seen as part of this broader movement or broader initiative called open science. There is another way to see it by using what is called the open science taxonomy that was developed by the Foster project, a project that was funded also by the Commission, and that one of the aims of the project was to generate a lot of resources to foster the idea of open science. You can go to the website and look at all the resources that are there. And as you see here, I always say that in fact, open science is just science or research with this open tag, because we have publications, we have data, we have the idea of reproducible research, evaluation, policies, and tools. And again, you see on the top the open access with all the rules, the definitions, the initiative, and that's what we will focus our talk today. I also like to mention this statement that was repeated by the former commissioner, Carlos Moedas. He was a commissioner till last year of research, science, and innovation. And he had a dream that sadly we couldn't make it true. His dream was that by 2020, everything, any publication, any result should be open access. And as you will see along the presentation, we are not yet. I mean, we are not almost at achieving this goal. We are on the way. There are different initiatives and there are different percentage of in where we are now in open access, but we couldn't help him to reach that final dream or final goal. So let's go to the definition of open access. And probably when you hear about open access, people will think that, well, this costs a lot of money. And I would like to stress along the talk also that yes, open access costs money, but the current system of publication costs money. Probably the cost of the current system is hidden because most of the costs are carried out by institutions. And when we talk about open access, probably we see that the costs are more directly addressed to the researchers. And that's why we have this impression on that open access is much expensive than the current system of publications. I will share with you some figures, some data, and we can discuss later in the Q&A section about that, or you can look for more information and get your own opinion on that. I like to go to the classics, and the classics in open access go back to 18 years ago. That was February 2002 when we had this Budapest Open Access Initiative. We used this initiative, this statement, or this declaration, as the foundations of the current movement of open access. Of course, before that date, there were other initiatives. For instance, in the field of physics, we had since 1991 a Preprint Server, a repository called Archive. But we always use this initiative of Budapest, that a document that was gathered in a meeting in Budapest held in December 2001 as our foundation to explain which is the situation currently. As you see here, the definition of open access is not just that we want all this literature, the literature that the researchers publish without the aim to obtain royalties for that. So mainly articles in journals, working papers, reports. So the idea was that all this literature should be free available, so without no cost to access, but also, and that's important, when we talk about open, it's not just free, it's that you can reuse by default. So this idea of free, so with no cost, and to be reused without any restriction. There is only two restrictions or two constraints, is that you should always acknowledge the authorship of that work and also maintain the integrity of the work. As integrity, I mean that it's that you cannot chop an article and erase, for instance, some conclusions on some paragraphs and making think other people that this is the original article. And this, the acknowledgement and the integrity are, for instance, two rights that are already recognized by any copyright law. In Budapest, to reach that goal, that was the goal that the people in Budapest decided to reach, they decided that they could have two strategies to do that goal. So you can walk two paths. And these two paths that I will show you in a second are now what they call the two flavors or the two routes to open access. Some people say that, oh, I'm more in one side than another, and from an institution point of view, I think that they are both complementary. So in our institution, the University of Barcelona, we have always thought that it's not choosing one or the other one, is choosing both, that we should implement both strategies. So what are those two strategies? So the first one is the self-archiving strategy. So the scholars, any researcher, should need the tools and the assistance to deposit any document already has been peer-reviewed in what is called an open electronic archive. This should be allowed by any publisher, even if you transfer any copyright to your creation. The second strategy was the creation of new journals that at that time there were some, but there were just a few, and now probably we see a lot of journals that we call open access journals. Open access journals that mainly are journals where the access is free. You don't have to pay to read these materials. And the importance of the feature, the main feature of that journal is that they use copyright not to restrict the access, but to allow the reuse. So they use a license to say to the people, this is free and you can reuse it. Of course, in Budapest already, there was this remark that if there is a cost, if there is you need to a price to maintain, to make sustainable this model, you will need to find some alternative of sources to get income, because if you don't charge for reading, you should need to find a business model. And of course, and that's probably this misunderstanding identifying open access journals with a business model. And because the most successful or the most known business model in open access journal is the one that the researcher pays when publishing. And probably it's not the researcher, probably what is the researchers through the research funds pays for publishing. Well, that was the idea, these two routes, but what we have now in the first route is what we call the green open access, and we have those repositories that can be institutional repositories or thematic repositories. For instance, Pubmed should be identified as a repositories with abstracts and sometimes also with full text articles. Usually it's free to post in the repositories, but of course they are not free at all, because at the end there is people working in there that get some money at the end of the month, and of course there are some costs in maintaining that infrastructure. In repositories, you see that probably in many cases we see that the copyright is transferred to publishers, because what we have there are papers that have already been published in journals, so there has been this transfer of copyright to the publisher, and rarely you'll find Creative Commons license, because the publisher likes to keep the idea of all rights reserved. On the other hand, the open access journals route has been a bit more complex, because we call it the gold open access route, and of course on the top you'll see that we have this idea of the open access journals. Open access journals where most of the most known journals, like, I don't know, the journals from PLOS, the Public Library of Science, journals from Biomed, from Indawi, or for instance from Springer Nature, like Scientific Reports or Net Communications, charge you a fee, an APC fee, for publishing. But there are still a lot of journals, and in fact there are more, but probably less relevant open access journals where you don't need to pay for publishing. They are already free to publish. And for instance, local journals, university journals follow this model of free to publish. In both cases, the copyright stays with the author. There is no transfer of copyright, and there is always a CC license stating that you are allowed by default to reuse the papers broadly. It depends on the license if there is a restriction or not. But at the same time, with the emergence of these open access journals, it appeared a new option, third option, let's call it that way, that is the hybrid option. The hybrid option is the one that is offered by the subscription journals, where they offer the researchers paying an APC, what an article processing charge, so paying a fee. They offer the researchers the choice to open just their paper. So if I pay a quantity of money, and that paper will be open to everyone. I will keep the copyright, there will be a CC license, and the rest of the journal, the rest of the issue will be closed. So that it's another option offered by the publishers that allows the publishers to get another source of income. Let's review here the different versions of the papers, because now when we are going to outline the different options that we have as researchers to share our papers, we will mention the different versions of this paper. So the first version is the submitted version, what we call the preprint. Is the first document we send to the publisher on the idea of having that published after these review versions. The review versions can be as many as required by the referees and the editors. It could be just one, it could be 2, 3, or it depends of the process, how long it lasts. Once the review version achieves the final accepted version, we will call it this review version, the accepted version, or postprint. And finally, we have another version, what we call the published version. The difference between the postprint and the published version, or also is known as the version of record, is that the final one, the published one, has all the layout and all the logos and pagination of the journal. But reading the text, looking at the images, looking at the tables, there will be no difference with the accepted version and the published version. So, as a researcher, what can I do? Well, the first option could be, let's find an open access journal It will be free for reading for anyone. There will be no payments or subscription for readers. As I mentioned before, there are several business models, but probably the most successful is that I will have to pay for publishing. As I said before, most of the funders states that this is an eligible cost. The authors keep copyright, and the reuse is allowed by means of a license that ideally is the CC BY. How much it costs? Well, this is a table, some data gathered from Frontiers when they increased the price in 2019. And as you see, the prices ranges from $0 to more than $5,000. As you see here, you have fully publishers open access like Frontiers, MDPI, eLive, or Public Library of Science. But also we have the classical ones, so Oxford University Press, Springer Nature, Elsevier, Wiley. All the publishers, have also this open access journals portfolio. They know that this is there is a market here, so they are offering also full open access journals. Second option is to choose the hybrid model. So I decided to go to a journal that, for many reasons, I want to publish there, but I want the open access immediately. So I have to pay as before in some of the cases of the open access journals. I keep copyright, I can allow reuse, and I probably, in many cases, I can have a CC BY or any other CC license. As before, the prices have a very variation, and the prices are here in the blue part. As you see here, we have also all the typical or traditional publishers. We don't have here the open access publishers like Public Library of Science, Frontiers, or MDPI, because they don't use the hybrid. They are completely gold open access. And as you see, the range is also getting from almost $0 to around $5,000. Well, it could be surprising because they already have the income from the subscriptions. And as you see on the left, the average of hybrid usually is, as you see here, is higher than the average of gold. So meaning that we pay in average more by opening just one journal than to publishing in a full open access journal. And just for the reflection is, well, let's think how much we are paying now to get subscribed, to get the resources and to provide them to our researchers. And if you count all the money that the different institutions are putting into the system, and we divide this amount with the number of articles that we publish in a year, well, there are some studies like the one I'm showing here that says that we are already paying a lot. So around this 4,000 or 5,000 euros per article. So probably the current system is more expensive than if we would move to a full open access system. Here also I would like to share with you this table that comes from Wellcome Trust with the payments that they have made during a year for publishing. And as you see on the top, we have Elsevier that received almost 2 million pounds for a hybrid. You see here the average on APCs, and just the fifth is the Public Library of Science, where you see that the average APC is below others APCs, even hybrid APCs. It's also important to remark that Springer Nature have changed along the last years between the amount of money in receiving in hybrid and fully open access, and the change is mainly because the emergence of scientific reports and network communications, where the number of articles has increased importantly, and that's why there are so many papers here on the list of Springer Nature. There is a third option. The third option is something that is like a trend nowadays, and it's to publish or to share the preprints. It's important to understand what is a preprint, because a preprint is a non-reviewed text that is made publicly available before the publication. So at the same time that you are trying to publish your paper in a journal, you publish before this first version. And once the paper has been accepted after all the peer review process, you can state in this preprint server that there is a final version, and you can provide, for instance, the DOI and address the reader to the final version of your paper. In these cases, in preprint servers, usually the authors keep copyrights, and in many cases, there are 60 licenses providing reusability of those papers. It's important to look at the figures, especially in some fields. For instance, in biology, with the emergence of what we call the bioarchive, the number of preprints per month have increased dramatically. We are above 2,000 papers a month. So it has been like now a new trend that for the importance of get the acknowledgement as soon as possible and to be the first, researchers wants to publish the primary resource, let's call it this way, or the primary version of the paper already on those preprint servers. There are preprint servers now for many disciplines. As I said before, probably the oldest is physics with the archive, and there was always a challenge on there would be a possibility to have a preprint server for medicine. It could be dangerous. It's important to know that there are papers published there that are not peer reviewed, that could be erroneous, that they could have some mistakes. Well, finally, the last fall, we the preprint server for health science was launched, and it's important to see that in this preprint server there is an important announcement of caution. There is not this announcement in the other preprint servers, and it's important to read carefully what they say. They say that preprints are preliminary reports of work that have not been peer reviewed. That's in the same, the other servers. And that's the importance that this message that follows. They should not be relied on to guide clinical practice or health-related behavior. So this is a message especially for the doctors, the practitioners of clinical practice. And the second message is also important because this paper should not be reported in news media as established information. It's a message going to the journalist, because it could be also this danger that a journalist goes to MetaArchive and finds some headline on some illness has been cured, and appear on the news media, and at the end that is not a correct result, and we find some mistakes. So this caution appears here, and well, we'll see how this preprint server evolves and if it's been used by researchers. Finally, we have a fourth option. Well, we don't decide to go open access. We don't decide to publish in open access journals. We don't decide to publish in a hybrid model. We are skeptical still about the preprints, and we go to the traditional venues, to the paywall journals that will allow authors to post a version of their published paper. And here, most of the typical traditional editors or publishers will allow you only to publish what is called the accepted version of preprints. The copyright, we will have to state that is transferred to the publisher, but at least the people can access to this paper, to this version, and can read for free. This is one of the restrictions. Another restriction is the embargo period. So sometimes we have to wait for a few months. It depends of the paper. It could be 1 year, or it depends of the journal. It could be for 1 year, for 2 years, even for 3 years from the publishing date, that you cannot provide full access to that paper. This is how Preprint or author manuscript looks like. So as you see, is not the final version of the paper, but as I said before, we already have all the information that it's in the final published version of the paper. And of course, those papers are published in repositories, and there are many repositories nowadays. Probably we have almost 5,000 repositories in the world. So probably for a repository manager will be hard to bring attention to it's her or his own repository. So what we do, the people who are behind some of the repositories, is that we try to get this attention through other channels. So for instance, I will share with you these two strategies that we are following at the University of Barcelona. The first one is to get attention to our repository through Pubmed. We know that many of the researchers in health science, if not all, go to Pubmed to look for new papers, new advancements of their own research. And what we have agreed with Pubmed is to provide them with the list of articles that are available in the repository. So what it means that when I go to a PubMed and I go for a paper that I'm interested in, I can click always to the original venue of that paper. So in this case, to Elsevier. But if this paper in this author manuscript version is available in our repository, it will appear our icon. So clicking to this icon, you will get immediately the PDF that is hosted in the repository. And this is for free, and it is completely legal because we follow the copyright transfer agreement that has been signed by the researchers and the publisher. The second option is the unpaid wall. Unpaid wall is a plugin that I advise to install in any of your browsers. It could be in Chrome or it could be in Firefox. And once you have this plugin, when you go to a paper, you go, for instance, to this journal and you look for a paper and you got the DOI, the plugin identifies the DOI, and if this paper is available in a repository, you will get this green sign telling you that there is a version available for free. If you click to the green button, then you will get straight to the PDF that is hosted in a repository. In this case, again in the repository of the University of Barcelona. So how is the situation nowadays? Well, we have this observatory of open access that we are gathering data for all the Catalan universities. We are also got some data from the different universities and the CSIC in Spain. And we also have some data of some research center. We haven't published yet the data of a specific research center, but we have all the information of the universities. And as you see here, there is a growing open access journals papers. There is a stabilization around 5% on the hybrid model. The green is only green, so it's papers that only are available in repositories, and the brown is the option that some journals take to open their contents after a period of time. And as you see, as old is a paper, so there is more chance to get this free access. We cannot really state it as open access because there is the lack of the license. You cannot really reuse it, but you are free to read it. So if we look at that, you'll see that we are around the 50% of the publications published by researchers from the Catalan universities that are available in any other ways for free to the readers. There is also people looking at why we are going down, and the reason is easy. We are going down because some of the papers are already in repositories, so you will be green in the near future, but they are still closed under the embargo because of the conditions established by the publishers. Finally, we have to remember that of course, it's always voluntary to share your papers through open access repositories or through open access journals, but also there is some requirements from funders. Europe, through the Horizon 2020, states that once you publish any results coming out from your project, you need to choose this gold or the green open access. In fact, if you choose the gold, so publishing in hybrid or publishing in an open access journals, there is also the requirement that you must put a copy in an institutional or thematic repository. And for the next year, in fact, again, here they were using the 2020 as a date, but in fact it has been delayed to 2021. We will have what we call the Plan S. Plan S is an initiative driven by the Coalition S. Coalition S is a group of national funders around Europe that they are planning to be more strict in the future, so from next year, and they will not allow a hybrid model, they will not allow embargo periods, and they will like that any result coming out from the funded projects will need to be open access immediately. And this is challenging because not all journals will be suitable for as a publication for these researchers, that they will be funded by these national funders. So there is a discussion among publishers, among funders, among universities, research centers, if this will be feasible or not. But they will still keep this date of 2021 as a date to change and to make a real change. Finally, I would like also to share with you this, what I call the full cycle. So I'm trying to change a little bit. It's Plan S is just changing the way we pay or we make the model, but with keeping the journals. Here is another initiative that is growing because there are some funders that are taking this option, like for instance, Wellcome Trust or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Here is there is no a journal, is a publication platform where the researchers publish the preprint version, so it could be seen as a preprint server, but in the same platform, you see all the different review versions, all the different reviewer comments. So we have what we say, it's an open peer review. So you can see how the paper has been improved with the different comments of the reviewers, and you see that some review accepts the paper as it is. There are other reviewers that ask for more explanations, more clarifications, etc., etc. And again, all these platforms are open, so meaning that they are free to read, and also they use CCC license. To end the talk, just to remember that there are other results beyond publications. We focus a lot on publications, especially also because the research assessment is mainly based on publications, but there is also the new challenge to share data. This is the leaflet that the Commission is using to promote its own policy on open access, on open data. And they call it now fair data because it's not just that data should be open as much as possible and closed when it's necessary, but also data should be findable by using DOIs or identifiers, accessible and interoperable, so to be reused by other people and other machines, and should be reusable. And if it's not reusable openly, at least should be state how I can reuse that data. But what is more important here is that this policy asks any researcher to make a data management plan. So to state what are you doing with your data. And I think this is the challenge for the next years, to think about all the research cycle, but with the data. So before conducting any kind of research, thinking about how you're gonna organize your data, how you're gonna make your data management plan, by thinking how you generate the data, where did you store the data, how you process it, analyze, how you preserve your data, how you share, it's possible, your data by using licenses, by using DOIs, by finding the best venue to share the data. And of course, if the data is fair at the end, people will be able to access and to build open your research. The questions to be answered in data management plan is, well, which data you will produce or gather or observe, in which formats, how it will be processed, how it will be stored, preserved, who will be accessed, and when we will have access to the data, who is responsible for the data, if there are any ethical questions that have been taken into account, and how data will be reusable. And the advice is that a data management plan doesn't mean that you have to state that all your data should be open. It's only a tool that can help you to think up before conducting research on how you're going to deal with your data. And of course, in many of the health projects, it's possible to say, well, I cannot really open my data because it doesn't make sense. It will be an infringement of privacy laws and privacy regulations. But maybe you can just say, I will open my metadata and I will make my data more findable, because people will know that I have data that need to be closed. But maybe by signing some confidential agreements or some special agreements, maybe that data would be reused by other people. Well, I just, to end my talk, I just leave these 5 points that comes from an article from a researcher that published in this journal, eLife, saying, what can I do now if I think that I would like to share more openly my research. So this is the 5 recommendations: to post free copies of your previously published research in public repositories, deposit preprints as soon as possible, publish in open access venues, public share data and materials via trusted repositories, and finally pre-register any studies. If you access to the paper, you'll see a broader explanation on all these 5 points. So that's all. If you have any questions now, I'm open to any questions and to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ignasi, for your presentation. It was very interesting for me. So I invite now the audience to raise a question or questions if they want it. You can even use the microphone or write the question on the chat, whatever you prefer.
Well, while they get engaged, I have a question, Ignasi, and my question refers to the preprints. I'm a bit confused about that, because what about if then the journal, is there any incompetencia, I don't know how you say that in English, with the policies of the journals?
So in fact, journals are changing their policies. I mean, journals cannot go really against the community. So they are accepting now that you publish before. This has happened in the physics world. So the journals accepted that you publish before in archive. They have still this power that you need to publish in a journal to get the research assessment. So if you publish in preprint, it counts 0. I mean, you don't get any promotion in your academic research. So at the end, you need to publish in a journal. So they are accepting these new ways of disseminating research or results as soon as possible. For instance, the chemical preprint server, what it's called ChemArchive, is supported by the 3 main scientific societies: the Royal Society of Chemistry, the American Chemical Society, and the German Chemistry Society. And these 3 societies are the main publishers of the chemical journals. So they accept that. There is not anymore this idea of this, you cannot publish in my journal if this publication has already been published somewhere else. They are accepting these previous versions because they know that at the end, what the researchers want were this prestige of being published in a traditional journal.
Thank you. And is there a list of all the journals that allow that?
Yes, I could say that mainly now, almost all the publishers will allow it, but also there is a list. In fact, it's in Wikipedia. I can look for it and put it in the chat, because that question was raised before in another talk or another training, and we found that, and there is an explanation of all these different.
Well, excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay. Are there other questions from the audience?
Okay,
Good
then
question.
I will
No, there is a question.
Oh.
There is a question in the chat
Okay.
in Catalan about the embargo periods and how to negotiate. Yeah, that's another challenge because the journals state that you have to keep your paper under embargo, so you cannot provide open access to full text for a period of time, and usually these periods of times are above what is required by the funder. So just to have an idea, most of the funders for health science and experimental science will ask you for 6 months of embargo. So after 6 months of publication, the paper should be in a repository available. But in many cases, especially for instance, Springer, Wiley, or many of the Elsevier journals, they will require for more than 12 months embargo. The question here was if we have negotiate any change in that, because if you ask the publisher will say, well, we have the option, the hybrid option, and they know that for instance, the commission will pay for that. I mean, it's a eligible cost. I don't like to pay hybrid. I think it's not a good way. So we have sometimes argued with a project officer that the paper is already in the repository before these 6 months, and the paper, all the metadata is available, so it's findable. And what we have in the repository is a button to require the full text. So we argue that at least with that, we are providing a kind of public access. We know that it's not completely open access, or it's not completely public for everyone, but we try to justify that we don't want to waste that amount of money. And as I showed before, there is a relevant amount of money. It's not just a few hundreds of euros, it's some thousands of euros, and we think that is not the way. So some project officers, I remember a case on the European Research Council grant, they accepted that that was an option. But we know that in the future, so meaning when Horizon Europe will end, and we will have Horizon 2020 will end, and we'll have Horizon Europe next year, there will be no excuses on embargoes, because embargoes will be not available at all. So we'll have to negotiate and to make changes with the publishers, and that's what we do. I mean, we're already starting some negotiations at the Spanish level to have what they call the transformative agreements and to change the system as it is now. I find another question here, why you recommend pay for open access if we have free access online service, Sci-Hub, or research communities? Good question. I don't recommend to pay for open access. I mean, I would like that open access will be free, but everything costs money. At the end, someone has to pay. I would recommend to have a more sustainable system. I must say that I would like to have legal systems, as I try to show with Unpaywall and other tools. I try to show that there are options that are free and legal. So of course you can always state, well, there is Sci-Hub, or you can go there and ask for the paper. Perfect. But for me, it's not the goal. I mean, at the end, my goal is to change the system. Sci-Hub is a system that still relies on the current publication system. So there's still journals, and somebody is paying for this subscription. So meaning that we as institutions are paying every year millions of euros to sustain this model. So I think we have to change the model in another way. And of course, the change cannot be tomorrow. We have to make a step by step. So probably Plan S, it's a good step, but for me, it's not the ultimate step. Probably the idea of the publishing platforms to being more open, to get the preprints together with the final versions, probably it's a possible way where you can have layers of quality, layers of peer review that could be provided by publishers that you can pay or not, you can choose that, or they can be also provided by scientific communities. So it's not that I recommend to pay for open access. I mean, it's a requirement nowadays that you have to publish open access, and I will recommend to everyone to put any paper that he or she has published in a repository. If the paper is available in a repository, we can get these legal tools to make that findable, and everyone can enjoy the reading and the discovery of those research results.
Mm-hmm. There's another question from Anna Mai.
Yes.
She said, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, we are working in that direction. So meaning, in Germany, in the Netherlands, and in other countries, they have signed these transitional agreements. If I'm now a German researcher and I want to publish in a Springer, or I want to publish in a Wiley journal, I don't have to pay an APC. but my paper will be open access immediately, the day after it has been, the moment is published. Why? Because the institutions, so the universities and research centers, have agreed with these publishers that with the same price that they were paying before for subscription, all the papers will be published in open access. And there will be no any complication, any bureaucracy for researchers to try to get the funds for publishing APCs, to get the money for publishing open access, etc. So that's for me a good idea. Of course, again, I mean, it's not the best idea. I mean, it's not the final idea because we still rely on publishers, we still rely on this impact factor assessment, etc. But at the end, if they ask me, well, we have to pay 4 million euros for just subscription, or you want to pay 4 million euros for subscription and open access, I will get the second choice. Of course, I would like to have free reading and open access for 2 million or for 2.5. But at least if I have to pay the same, I would like to have it open access. And this is a commitment that was approved last year for the National Rectors Conference, the Spanish National Rectors Conference, the CRAI. And I have to tell you that there is now a negotiating team that has been built during the last month or last 2 months. And we are now proposing for this year, for 2020, to negotiate with Springer, with Elsevier, and with Wiley in that direction. So telling them we have to renew all these subscriptions for next year at the national global, at the national level. So we are now trying to make our main strategy and our goals for the renewal of the subscriptions, and the idea is to get this kind of agreements, so that from 2021 we would like to have our researchers in Spain to publish the way they publish in Germany without adding more money into the system.
Yeah, so there's another question from Ana Carrillo. She says, if authors pay to get published, could this bias journals in the review?
Yes, well, that's one of the dangers, of course, and also there has been also some critics on journals, these mega journals, so like Scientific Reports or PLOS ONE, where the quality of the review is said that is below other standards, and they prioritize the fastest publication, and they prioritize that, well, in general, the presentation of the results are good, but it could be improved with a more longer peer review. It's one of the dangers, but of course, again, if at the end, if we have everything open access and we pay for APCs, at the end, the publisher has to show you some added value. Why I have to publish there, or I take another option. So at the end, if the quality of the review goes below some standards, you will choose other places to publish. But it's something that you have to take into account, and also there is this danger of what we call now the predatory journals, journals that the quality is very low, and that they offer you to publish in their journals as soon as possible with almost no peer review. But there is also an initiative called Think, Check, and Submit that they ask you, and I was answering that to a researcher last week, where he was asking me for advice in publishing in one journal or the other one, and I told her, look at the editorial board. Look at the papers. Has anyone that sounds familiar in your field has been published in that journal? If you don't find people that is relevant in your field, your colleagues are not published in that journal, I will advise not to choose that journal. In this case, there were some known people from our university in the editorial board. So I said, contact them, talk with them. Why are you there? Because sometimes those names also appear there without themselves knowing that they are there. So then sometimes they use the names. So I will advise that to think about what is the best place to publish, check, make as many checks as possible, and then at the end, when you have all this information, you choose. And of course, you can always choose to go to strange places, but that's your option. It's not that just you receive an email saying, oh, I have the best journal for you. So do that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ignasi. So there's a last question from Communication Inspires. Hi, Global. So they say, what is your opinion about non-scientific publications such as results, fact sheets to media or civil society groups? Do they widen the concept on open access?
Oh, well, I mean, I would like to have many papers beyond open scientific publications in an open way. There are organizations, there are communities that they do that by default. The problem is that by law, by default, if you don't say anything, it's like if you were sharing closed. So meaning that you can publish anything in internet or in other places, but if you don't use a license, is by all rights reserved. So I have to ask permission to reuse that. So I always advise any of these organizations to use CC as default. Choose the license you like. In my opinion, in many cases, you can use CC BY. But if you want to reserve some of the commercial uses, or you want to reserve the derivative words, you can do that. But share more open the way we are sharing now. There are organizations like or institutions like the La Generalitat, the Catalan government, that they have that in the editorial policy. There is a editorial policy in the Catalan government approved many years ago that they say that any document they publish should be under a Creative Commons license. It doesn't say Creative Commons license because of the question of trademarks, but you can read that along the lines. And it's true, they do. And any publication they do, they use that. So if you do a fact sheet, if you do any document, please do that. We try to do also at the university. We publish many leaflets, many information. We also publish educational resources. I think that's another important thing, to open educational resources. We try to use CC license in educational resources because we think that other educators and other students beyond our own students could be able to use and reuse our documents. And in educational resources, I always advise to allow derivative works, because for sure your resource that could be the best one, as you think, it could be improved. And if you allowed this reusability by making new derivative works, probably we'll get better and better educational resources. And probably we don't have to reinvent the wheel every day. If we have already a good resource for education, maybe just translating or making some slight adaptation will be fine for you.
Okay. Okay, I think that was the last question. So thank you, Ignasi, for your amazing presentation. I enjoyed a lot, and I assume that the audience too. Regina?
Yes, thanks a lot, Ignasi. It's been a great pleasure to listen to you. We have learned a lot, and it's very nice to hear that you are managing the community of open access. You are really managing to change the system with a strong impact at the moment, with the planners and many supporting initiatives from the European Commission, and also at national level and funding organizations organized at international level. So it's quite amazing how the structural changes is moving further. So it's a great pleasure to hear it. The audience today in this webinar, we share this willingness to change the system. We are from the community, as you know, of responsible research and community-based participatory research. So we are trying to change the way the challenge is defined with a wider variety of inputs and perspectives, but also how the research question is determined with all this participation as well, and how the process is implemented also with wider input of perspectives within the scientific community, but also from outside the scientific community. So that's the reason why we are so keen on hearing that you are managing with this impact on changing the system. And we hope that we will manage to cooperate in this field of open science and open access in the future with, for example, now in Catalonia, there is a law that is being prepared to launch all these initiatives. So we hope that within this law, we will find ways to collaborate and to change the system at all levels. So thanks a lot again. It's been a pleasure and hope to see you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marina. Thank you very much, Rosina, and all the people who has attended the webinar. And as you said, it's we have to work together and to reach that final goal and to make the research closer, not just to our colleagues, our researchers, but to everyone, to the society in general. And I follow the work you are doing in your institution, but also through your projects. And as we said many times, RRI and open science and open access go together, and we have to in that direction. Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to collaborate with you further. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.